Okay, so now we're moving along. We're now at else clauses. Again, if you're new to this channel and you're just finding this course and you would like to follow along, the curriculum link is in the description. It's free. You can follow along and you can share the resources with whoever you want to share the resources with. It's a good resource. Okay, so that's kind of recap a little bit. So we learned about the if conditional. We understand what is a compound operator. Tell me what it is. What is a variable? What is it used for? What are data types? How many data types are there? What kind of data types? When I say everything in JavaScript is an object except fill in the blanks. Go ahead and tell me what a Boolean expression is. What's a regular expression? These are the things you want to keep drilling yourself because you want to learn the terminology. What is an operand? What is a Boolean operand? What is, operator? What is the difference between operators and operands? These are the things you need to know. So let's hop back into the curriculum. Here, else clauses. An else clause can be paired with an if statement to specify code that should be executed when the condition is false. Now, this is what I was trying to talk about earlier, because when you run a condition and this is false in the conditional, nothing happens. But we put an else clause in to print out something to let us know that the code didn't come back true. So you don't have to wonder, did it work? So this code block that will execute if the condition is false. So the first part of the condition of the if condition, if that's true, the first code block runs. But if it's false, the else code block runs. Look at the syntax here. If else. Now we can use an else clause within our bank app to send a message if no bills are currently due. So let's think about that. Here we created a variable and we're setting the state to true, a true Boolean. So now this object is true. Now, if not bill has been paid, or if not true, because that's what it references, then this statement is true, then this is going to print out. If it's false, your payments are up to date. That makes sense, right? We want to write code that makes sense. The structure is known as a if-else statement, and it provides a mechanism for branching. Here's a new word now, branching. The flow of the program can take one of the two paths when it reaches a conditional, depending on whether the condition is true or false. Remember this word branching, because when you understand the terminology, you're able to solve those coding puzzles, especially when you get your first interview, or if you're going on a job. If you understand the terminology, you'll be able to handle or solve the code. Senior developers, if they've been doing it for a while and really understand the programming language, whenever you give them a scenario or a problem to solve, because they understand the terminology, they know how to solve the problem. We can always Google the syntax if we don't remember the syntax, but the reason why I may solve it a certain way is because I understand what I need for it to do. I know how to get the results. So here's something to look at. Here's a diagram. We have true on this side, we have false on this side, and we're coming down this fork row, which is the condition. If the condition is true, we'll go down and run this block of code. If the condition is false, we'll run this type of code, block of code. Now the else if statement. Now pay attention to this. If-else statements allow us to construct two alternative paths. Pay attention here. Alternative paths. A single condition determines which path will be followed. We can build more complex conditionals using an else-if clause. These allow us to add additional conditions and code blocks, which facilitates more complex branching. You remember what that branching is. So here is an example. We declared and initialized two variables. One X, and it has a value of 10, or the data type number, Y, and it has the data type number of 20. Now here's the condition. If X is greater than Y. So I can look at this and tell that is true. X is greater than Y. So it's going to cancel the log X is greater than Y. Else if X is less than Y, cancel log X is less than Y. And then we finish it out. If none of these are true, we're going to have cancel log X and Y are equal. Okay, so right now we know they're not equal. It's less, one is greater than and less than the other. But if I was to make this both of them 20, this block of code will run. Let's go ahead and play around with it. I'm doing this because I want you to play around with code. You gotta understand it. The more you understand, the more you'll be able to write complex programs. So here I'm going to paste that in. And so now when I run this code, X is less than Y. So that is true. It ran this code right here. X is less than Y, right there. And so let me hit my up arrow. Now let me change that 10 to a 20. Now when I run it, it says X and Y are equal. So it ran this else clause right there. Now if I go up here and then I change Y to 10 and now run it, now it ran that code block. X is greater than Y. Why did I do this? I want you to be able to understand the logic. And the only way you're going to do that is by playing around with the code, giving yourself different scenarios to see what the results are. Okay, so let's summarize the following execution of this conditional. Line 4 begins with the conditional. The Boolean expression X is greater than Y evaluates to false since 10 is not greater than 20. This causes line 5 to be skipped. Line 6 contains an else if statement. And look at the syntax. It's the same as the if. It just has else in front of it. Notice the curly braces. But notice this else down here, it doesn't have parentheses. Notice the parentheses, This else doesn't have parentheses, so pay attention to that. Now, the code block associated with the else clause on line 8 through 10 is skipped because one of the conditions was met, which was true. So if one of these conditions are true, this third one will not execute. We had to make both of these equal in order for these two to be false and then this else to run. Now, as with a simple if statement, the else clause is optional. You don't have to have an else clause with an if statement, but it just makes things better for the user experience. The following example does not print anything since both conditions evaluate to false and there is no else clause. Because we didn't have an else clause, nothing prints. So if you go ahead and I want you to do this for yourself, go ahead and open up the console and run it and notice that nothing happened. I want you to see it for yourself. We can construct conditionals using if, else if, and else with a lot of flexibility. The only rules are we may not use else or else if without preceding it with a if statement. So you have to have an if statement first. Else and else if clauses are optional. You don't need them. Multiple else if statements may follow the if statement, but they must precede the else clause if one is presented. So that means if we have an else clause, that else clause is the last thing that goes into the conditional if you're going to use one. Now, only else clauses may be used. Only one else clause can be used. You can't have more than one, only one. Regardless of the complexity of a conditional, no more than one of the code blocks will be executed. So only one of these can be true at a time. Both of them can't be true unless we make it a compound conditional. Now, even though both of the conditions x modulus 5 equals 0 and x modulus 2 equals 0 evaluate to true, neither of the associated code blocks is executed when the condition is satisfied. The rest of the condition is skipped. Okay? So here, if x is greater than y, we made it 10 and 20. If x is less than y, this one is going to run. But it says else if x is modulus equal to 0, meaning that does 5 go into it evenly, console.log x is divisible by 5. Else if x is modulus 2 equal to 0, which it do go into all of them evenly, then this will be running. But it never makes it down there, because when it says x is less than y, when it hit this, once this hit true, the rest of the code doesn't run. So that's what that means. All right. So we made it to the end of this section. You're going to have to play with the code, open up the console, do different scenarios. Remember, to go to a new line in the console in your browser, you have to do Shift Enter. I can't remember what it is on a Mac, but I think it's Shift Enter on the Mac as well. But it's a different on the Mac. I have to look at it, but play around with it to get an understanding of it. So that's the end of this particular section. I'll see you in the next section. And remember, the more you do, the more you improve.